to go ahead with it?
Well, Chris, it's great to be back with you. The president did very seriously consider it. The task force met yesterday with the vice president. It was the unanimous decision of the recommendation of the task force to go forward with the advisory. The vice president, myself, Mark Meadows, and others met with the president yesterday afternoon, and he decided to go forward with the recommendation.
What was it that made him think a quarantine might be necessary, and again, why did he decide not to do it?
Chris, I think the president wanted to consider all the options. He was obviously concerned what was going on with New York. He spoke to the task force, he spoke to the governors, and he was comfortable that people would take this advisory very seriously and would not travel.
The coronavirus task force, of which you're a member, is meeting this weekend to come up with new guidelines after the 15 days how to stop the spread of the virus guidelines end tomorrow. Here's what the president said this week about what he'd like to see.
I would love to have the country opened up and just raring to go by Easter.
As Treasury Secretary, do you think that's realistic, to open up parts of the country, to open up parts of the economy as soon as 2 weeks from today, which will be Easter?
Chris, I'm going to leave that decision to the medical professionals and the president. My full-time focus right now is we couldn't be more pleased that the Senate and House reacted very quickly, signed an enormous package to support U.S. workers and the U.S. economy. The president signed it into law, and my full-time focus is delivering on that. And let me just say, the SBA is working very closely with the Treasury. We expect to have a program up on Friday that will be up and running, that will cover half of the private workforce. I encourage all small businesses to take out these loans, because if you go and hire back your workers for 8 weeks, you will have a forgivable loan and the government will pay for that. So again, it is very important for us that workers are protected, and this is a major part of the package.
Mr. Secretary, I'm going to get to that package in a moment, but I want to press on this issue of perhaps changing the guidelines, because that not only has a lot of health implications, it also has a lot of economic implications. There's been a lot of pushback from public health experts about the idea of reopening parts of the country where there's a lower incidence of the virus, opening them up perhaps within 2 weeks. Our very next guest, Dr. Tom Inglesby, head of the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, says this disease will not respect state borders and city borders and will move around this country just like it's moved around the world. So the question is, if the virus spread from China to Italy, can it spread from Chicago to Iowa? And if we were to reopen parts of the country too soon, wouldn't that be the worst thing for the economy if we see the virus spreading into more areas?
Chris, I can assure you the president's #1 objective is the health of the American public and protecting the American public. And we're going to do everything to support the economy. The task force will be reviewing it. It'll be discussing it with the president. There hasn't been any recommendation made yet. So again, let me just emphasize, the president wants to make sure that we kill this virus, and we do it quickly. And the medical professionals are working on that. And while we do that, we have now a gigantic economic program to support American workers and American business.
Yeah, let's get to that. You were the key administration figure negotiating that $2 trillion, some call it relief bill, some call it a stimulus bill. One part of that is $500 billion, $500 billion to help dealing with various big corporations. How much discretion do you and the president have in deciding who to give that $500 billion to, which corporations, and under what terms?
Chris, there's 2 parts to this program. There's approximately $50 billion that we can make direct Treasury loans that are subject to the president and my approval. Those are specifically designed for the airline business and for the cargo business, which are national security concerns, and also give us flexibility if there are other national security companies. And let me be clear, taxpayers will be fully compensated for those loans. The other part of the package is for us to work with the Federal Reserve. I think you know Chairman Jay Powell and I now speak multiple times a day on a regular basis. The 13.3 was a package that existed under the Federal Reserve Act. The Federal Reserve has the ability to make broad-based lending programs available. Once the Fed requests those actions, they come to me. I have to approve them as Treasury Secretary, and in many cases, I contribute capital to support that in consultation with the President. So these are very important programs. We think they can provide about $4 trillion of liquidity to the American economy. Again, we expect we will get paid back on these loans. These are temporary support for the American economy that's very, very, very critical, and we've already rolled out many of these already.
But Mr. Secretary, one of the big sticking points when you were negotiating with Democrats in the Senate is they wanted an inspector general to oversee the big loans, the big grants to big corporations. And just 2 hours after the president signed the $2 trillion bill, he put out a signing statement saying that he will only allow that inspector general to report to Congress under, quote, presidential supervision. So didn't that basically violate the deal you made with the Democrats in the Senate?
I don't think that's the case, Chris. There's constitutional issues. Again, we're going to have full transparency. The way this works is we have full transparency in reporting what we're doing to the American public. We also have a bipartisan oversight committee that will review our actions. We are fully comfortable that whatever we do, we want full transparency, and we're very careful in what we're doing about supporting American workers and the American economy.
So directly, will the inspector general that was provided for in this bill be allowed to testify and report to Congress?
Chris, I'm going to leave that to the lawyers, okay, and to Congress to figure out. My full-time objective right now is to make sure this administration does everything we can to get this money into the economy quickly. That's a combination of small business loans that will be available this week. And let me just be clear, this is not just normal SBA lenders. Any FDIC bank, any credit union, any fintech lender will be authorized to make these loans subject to certain approvals. We'll also have direct deposit into people's accounts within 3 weeks, so they have checks. These are bridge checks. We have enhanced unemployment insurance that we're working with the states. This is all about the president's determination to support the U.S. economy.
Finally, Mr. Secretary, 3.3 million people applied for unemployment benefits this week. That is 4 times the previous highest record since 1967 when these records were kept. Former head of the CBO says that we're going to see an unemployment rate in the next few months of 20%. Your former company, Goldman Sachs, is projecting that GDP in the second quarter, instead of being up 2% or 3%, is going to be minus 24%. Is that what you're seeing at the Treasury Department? 20% unemployment, a GDP shrinking from year over year by a quarter?
Chris, it's hard to predict these numbers because we've never had anything like this where we've shut down the U.S. economy for medical reasons. The economy was in very, very good health, and we shut it down. And let me just say, we're very sympathetic to the people who don't have jobs, and that's why the president was very clear that he wanted me to work with Congress on a bipartisan basis quickly to support those people. So I hope, number one, businesses rehire, small businesses rehire those people now that they'll have the money. Number two, people will have enhanced unemployment insurance. And number three, people will have direct deposit money in their accounts to provide liquidity. And we want to get people back to work as quickly as we can, subject to the medical conditions.
Understood, but briefly, and I've got about 30 seconds left. You're saying, you seem to be saying that 20% unemployment and GDP minus a quarter, 24%, is not impossible. May not last long, but we may see those numbers. We may have to live with that.
Chris, I don't know what the numbers are going to be this quarter. What I do think is we are going to kill this virus. We're going to reopen this economy. And in the third quarter of this year, you're going to see this economy bounce back with very large GDP numbers and low unemployment back to where we were beforehand. So the president is determined that we protect people and reopen the economy when it's the right time.
Secretary Mnuchin, thank you. Thanks for your time during these busy days. Always good to talk with you, sir.
Thank you, Chris.
Up next, the spread of the virus in the United States, warnings of a second wave, and an expert's serious concerns about ending social distancing too soon. Where there are serious hotspots, and then there are broad areas where there are very few cases. So why can't we, as the president is suggesting, treat different parts of the country where the virus is at a very different state, treat those different parts of the country differently?
Well, I think the first reason is that I don't really have confidence. I don't think many in public health have confidence that we really know where all the cases are. We've begun to do much more diagnostic testing around the country, especially in places where there is a lot of illness. But in some parts of the country, we don't have enough coverage of diagnostic testing. We're seeing what we see, but there could be twice as many, 3 times as many, 4 times as many cases in a particular area of the country that aren't yet recognized. So we need to get to a point in the country where we have such extensive diagnostic testing that we can test people who have mild symptoms. Right now, in many places in the country, if you have mild symptoms, you can't get a test. But those people can spread the disease just as well as the people who are sick in the hospital. So we need to get to a point where we have, go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt, but the president talks about in these certain areas of the country that people could actually go back to work, go back to offices, as long as they practice the guidelines for these last 15 days. In the office, social distancing. In the office, good hygiene, washing your hands a lot. Take a look at what the president said.
We can socially distance ourselves and go to work, and you have to work a little bit harder. You can clean your hands 5 times more than you used to.
Dr. Inglesby, will that work?
I don't think so. I think if we've seen in Italy, for example, which is a number of weeks ahead of the United States in terms of its epidemic, that even with very serious, very aggressive social distancing measures where people have been kept at home, schools have been closed, everyone is recommended not to leave their homes, that this disease has continued to spread and is causing national crisis. So at this point, I think what we need to do is really stick with what other countries that have had more success have done, which is they've largely been in Asia, Singapore, Hong Kong, South Korea, China, Taiwan. They have put in place social distancing measures until they've gotten control of the epidemic convincingly, and at that point begun to try experiments with loosening it. And I do think we will get to that point. Obviously, we need to, as a country, get to a point where people can go back to work. But if we go back to work too quickly, this epidemic is going to spread widely and aggressively, and we won't have a normal economy in that case anyway. So I really do think that, while this epidemic continues to be on the rise in many places in the country, and we don't know enough about diagnostics in many other parts of the country, we really should hold the course.
So, if Easter, as the president has suggested, is too soon to begin to loosen the reins in the, quote, low-risk areas, when would you say, this is the kind of question reporters ask, and I'm sure even epidemiologists like you, hey, 2 questions. One, what is the earliest that you think that we could begin to loosen the reins in some of the less affected areas? And then the question I'm sure you're getting over and over, how long is this going to last before we really go back to normal?
So I think dates are hard to predict because every day the numbers continue to go up in many parts of the country. I think we should really have this more like a conditions-based decision. So when we see a state or a region have numbers that go down over time, and when we have diagnostics in place, and when we have masks available for all of our doctors and nurses who are putting their lives at risk to take care of sick patients, and hospitals are well prepared, and when we can get our public health systems in place to start tracing or identifying individuals and tracing their contacts, again, like they do in Asia, I think those 5 major conditions, then I think it's a time to begin to think about how we might experiment with lightening social distancing, perhaps one step at a time. It's not clear to me when that's going to happen. I think we'll have to see where we are in 2 more weeks. In other countries where they put social distancing measures in place aggressively, it's taken about 4 weeks for those measures to begin to have an effect. But at that point, I think we could begin to look for the conditions that might make it safe to begin to lower our social distancing, but not until then.
Dr. Inglesby, thank you. Thanks for providing your expert analysis, and please come back, sir. Up next, increasing cooperation and some tension between the president and the nation's governors who are on the front lines of fighting the coronavirus. We'll talk with Maryland's Larry Hogan, head of the National Governors Association. That's next.
Who are they've either already lost their jobs or they're about to lose them. What does this package mean for them? How quickly can they get it?
It comes from a close reading of the bill and also talking to sources today. So unemployment benefits. This bill increases unemployment benefits by $600 per week for everyone who is able to receive them, and that could be a very wide group. It would add 13 weeks of additional unemployment over what your state allows now. And Judy, that's the key issue. How long will it take for these increased benefits to get to people? It depends completely on the state and their system, as well as how long it takes each state to stand up the kind of administering of this money, which could be significant.
So Lisa, let's focus on what this means for jobs and people worried about their bank accounts. This direct money, it goes to people directly. How does it work?
There's so many questions about this, and I got a lot of information about it today. So a reminder, we're talking about those $12 for each individual checks. This bill. Now, they go to a very wide group, essentially everyone who has a tax ID number. That does include people on Social Security. There is a limit. It goes to people, individuals making under $75,000, married couples making under $150,000. Now, if you're single and have a child, your limit is $112,500, by the way. Now, one of the things you know about this, when could these checks be in our mailboxes or bank accounts? If you use direct deposit, taxes, I'm told that in that case it could be 3 to 4 weeks. If you do not use direct deposit, it will be longer. One other note about these checks, Judy, they are not taxable.
And Lisa, apologies for some of the audio difficulties we're having. Obviously, everybody knows you're working with a computer there. But let's talk about the money that's going to companies. Obviously, some of this going to big companies. But what about small businesses? What are they getting, and how is that going to work?
Right. This is a huge part of this bill, Judy. This is payments that they're going to try and keep workers on the payroll for small businesses. The $350 billion in loans. People should know that money is meant to take care of 8 weeks of payroll and rent. And that money will also be retroactively to pay back possibly as far as February 15th, possibly up to June 30th of this year. This money, Judy, initially will be a loan, but it will become a grant if it is used only for workers, and it's going to be a lot of money.
And Lisa, how fast can these small businesses get this money?
I only have one source who is able to give me an answer on that, because this depends on banks being able to get this money out. They think that they are going to move as fast as possible, but for small businesses, it does not look like this loan will get in their bank account April 1st. They're hoping for maybe around then, but much to be determined on that.
Wherever the virus stands, at the same time targeting the virus. But Larry Summers, let's talk about what more needs to be done. There are people who are saying this relief is great in this $2.2 trillion bill, but it's only going to last, we just heard Lisa Desjardins say, 8 weeks in some instances. What is the most powerful thing that can be done in addition to this? Is it more cash directly to individuals? Is it loans to small business? What exactly is it?
All the above, Judy. I think the highest priority right now would be to add enough money for state and local governments, for mayors to take care of their people. That's the first priority. Second priority is we've got to be on a wartime footing with respect to getting tests, with respect to getting protective equipment, with respect to getting ventilators to take care of people. And we need to spend whatever it takes. We need to use whatever authorities the government has to deliver the resources so that we can target people, get the assistance to the people who need it, be secure in the knowledge that we're identifying the people who are victims, and also recognizing the people for whom it is safe to go out and go back to work again. Make no mistake, no matter how much money the Federal Reserve commits, no matter how big a budget deficit we run, we cannot solve this problem until we contain the virus. And that's why a careful, strategic, determined strategy of the kind that Dr. Fauci is pushing is what we need. But above all, in a war, and that's what we're in, you have to be steadfast, you have to be moving forward in a consistent direction, and you have to not change course every few days. And that's why the president's talk about Easter, about 15 days, is so potentially dangerous and destabilizing.
Now, Larry Summers, you have to have hope also. Remember who's really in charge here is God, and you don't want to lose hope and faith. Be vigilant, and the president has been, and give him credit. He has been very much so, but he's not going to be pushed around just because you have your opinion. Lots of other opinions have to be expected to brought to the president, and the president has to make the decision with the best advice he can get from all viewpoints. Let's stand together and stop attacking the president.
The most profound test of American society since Pearl Harbor. Whether we can manage the resources to contain the virus and at the same time protect and maintain the most vulnerable among us as a society. It's a test of our competence, it's a test of our compassion, it's a test of our will. I think ultimately...
You forgot one thing, Larry. It's a test of our obedience to God. Godly principles. Without that, you won't win a war.
Congress was able to pass this massive legislation, the way the Fed has been able to step in and address the financial problems. But the really important thing is the strength of our effort around addressing the disease and protecting its victims. That's what history is going to judge us on.
And that's what the president is doing properly, and give him his due credit, as well as Mike Pence and their entire team. They're working very hard to do just that, and they expect cooperation from these governors to get off their duffs and do their jobs.
Hospitals in more and more cities are feeling the pressure and consequences of COVID-19 cases. New York State is still at the center of some of the worst of it. Hospitalization shot up 40% in one day, and there were 100 deaths there in just about 24 hours. William Brangham gets a view from the front lines of what's being done to adjust to a worsening situation.
That's right. Some hospitals are already being overrun, and many are taking extraordinary steps to prepare for the wave of patients to come. Stony Brook University Hospital on Long Island, New York, is one of those places. They've been asked by Governor Andrew Cuomo to double their bed capacity in just a few weeks. Carol Gomes is CEO of that hospital. Ms. Gomes, thank you very much for being here. I wonder if you could just start off by giving us a sense of how is your hospital, how's your system doing right now?
So clearly with this pandemic underway and the apex of the storm at us approaching us quickly in the next 14 to 21 days. There's a concerted effort of focus, a concerted effort to address safety, and a concerted effort to take care of our patients. It's a very serious nature, but we're tackling this with all of our might.
And right now, can you give us a sense of how many COVID-19 patients you currently have?
Sure. Well, each day, obviously, it escalates, and the numbers that we received this morning could potentially be different than the ones we have, currently now or in the next 5 minutes. But last we heard, there were 70 plus cases positive, and we have many persons under investigation who are pending laboratory tests. And the numbers continue to escalate each day. But here we are constructing tents in a parking lot, a large tent. We are able to see hundreds of patients coming through, particularly for COVID testing.
I mean, I know that you have a relatively large hospital. The idea that you're building a tent out in the parking lot seems to signal the depth of how serious this is.
This is extremely serious. The governor of New York asked each CEO of every hospital in New York State to increase its surge capacity by at least 50%, and then subsequently, a day or two later, requested for all of us to increase our capacity by additional 100%. So we have 624 beds. That means we need to create another 624 beds. And so when you only have a limited amount of space, you have to start to be creative.
I've been talking with doctors and hospital officials at several different locations this week, and I've been hearing a real sense of anxiety and concern about the storm that in some places is already there in certain hospitals and the storm that is coming to others. I'm curious how your staff is doing. How are people holding up under all this?
I can't be more proud of our Stony Brook medicine team. They come in every day. They are serious-minded. They are laser-focused. We know we have a job to do. We know we have to care for these patients who will be coming in by the droves, and we will do everything we can to ensure their safety and the safety of our team. We have to prepare for this surge in every way, shape, and form possible. Staffing, supplies, and space. And so everyone is completely laser-focused on this task.
Do you have enough supplies right now? We've certainly been reading about the shortage of N95 masks, the shortage of ventilators, the shortage of protective gowns. Do you feel like you have enough equipment to do the job safely that you need to do?
Well, I don't believe we're any different than any other hospital in the United States. We're all clamoring for supplies, N95s, face shields, the like. So we have the good fortune of professors and researchers and scientists who are on campus at Stony Brook University. We have folks who are working on using 3D printers to create face shields. So this is really an enormous effort, and everyone is involved. We also found a link on how to make hand sanitizer and sent it to our chemistry department. And lo and behold, they started making gallons and gallons of hand sanitizer. So,
Amen.
yes, supplies are limited, but we're certainly not waiting for them to come to us. We're taking matters into our own hands as best as we can.
That's what we all need to do. Pitch in and help.
I think anyone would look at what you're doing and salute the ingenuity and the taking this on yourself, but it does seem like that this is a sign of something very, very serious, where you guys are having to make supplies that just a month ago most hospitals took for granted and took as just regular equipment that we have. You now have to make it yourselves.
Yes. But when you don't have a choice in the matter, you have to take action, and that's precisely what we're doing to ensure the safety of our team.
We know that the governor of New York has asked everyone who's not involved in what are called essential services to largely stay at home. What is your sense about how the Long Island community is heeding that request? Are people following those recommendations?
Well, I've been spending most of my time in the hospital, so it's hard to be able to say firsthand. I certainly do hope people are heeding those warnings, as it will give us the opportunity to flatten the curve and potentially slow that surge of patients. And that's our goal, is to flatten that curve and prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Right.
All right, Carol.
Absolutely.
of Stony Brook University Hospital. Thank you very much, and best of luck to all of you out there.
And pray.
Thank you.
And thankful that the governor of Kentucky and the legislature of Kentucky and our state reps and state senators and congressmen and Senator Mitch McConnell are doing their job to take care of this virus, COVID-19, and also to be prepared for getting us all back to normal with hope and prayers.
People fleeing violence, even if they come legally and show no signs of being sick. Gene Guerrero of member station KPBS spoke to families stuck in limbo at the country's busiest land border crossing just south of San Diego in Tijuana.
And keep the borders secure.
His family from Michoacan, Mexico, wants to ask for asylum in the U.S. Last week, after 7 months on an asylum wait list, it was finally their turn to enter and start pleading their case. But when they came to the port of entry, they learned the border had been shut down because of the coronavirus. They asked us to hide their identities for safety reasons.
We're escaping a place where you can't really live. They extort you, and if you don't pay, they kill you.
Anna has pictures of her house from when she says it was riddled with bullets, and marks on her body from when she was beaten by the local gang.
The virus worries me because of my health. But what worries me much more is what I've experienced. We're truly in danger in Mexico.
She has audio of when she says the gang broke into her house and threatened her. The family and tens of thousands want refuge, but they're stuck in Mexico. It's unclear when the port will reopen. Lines at the once bustling port dwindled drastically after the U.S. banned non-essential travel at the border last week, in addition to the ban on everyone without U.S. documents. Tens of thousands of people normally cross daily to work and shop. Paola Avila of the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce says the impact on workers will be severe, but that the halted traffic is necessary.
People are going to lose jobs, our businesses are going to suffer from that halt. But it's something that we have to contribute.
Vulnerable families fleeing death threats could be the most affected. Some jump the border wall out of desperation. President Trump says new restrictions are meant to prevent an outbreak in border stations and beyond.
Our nation's top healthcare officials are extremely concerned about the grave public health consequences of mass, uncontrolled cross-border movement.
Absolutely.
Tijuana migrant shelters are scrambling to keep up with the need for beds. Casa de Migrantes director, Father Pat Murphy, rolled out new rules to try to prevent an outbreak.
So one of the decisions we made is to put less people in each room. Instead of 10, there are 5, so they can be a little separated.
Migrants' hands are sanitized each time they enter, and a doctor will soon be checking temperatures every day. The shelter is reducing intake to 80 people, half its usual capacity, to keep people spread out. Murphy is worried he and others can get the virus.
I'm 68, I shouldn't even be down here. I should be up in my room for the next 2 months. But my heart doesn't let me do that.
Here, asylum seekers have a place to eat and feel safe until it's their turn to enter the U.S. But the shelter doesn't have room for everyone. Many sleep on the street, where they're exposed to cartel violence. Others stay in cramped tents, where it's hard to protect themselves from getting sick. Murphy says the Trump administration is using the coronavirus to push a political agenda and hurt some of the world's
nonsense.
People.
He's taking advantage of this situation to take away the few rights that people have left to ask for political asylum. He has no idea of the suffering.
But the acting secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Chad Wolf, says the decision to turn these people away is based on input from the nation's top health leaders at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention.
The CDC director has determined that the introduction and spread of the coronavirus in the department's border patrol stations and detention facilities presents a serious danger to migrants, our frontline agents, and officers, and the American people.
That is right.
The U.S. has more than 75,000 confirmed coronavirus cases. Mexico has about 500. This private cross-border healthcare provider helped set up checkpoints in Tijuana, a short walk from the U.S., to give free coronavirus symptom screenings. Ricardo Vega, president of the Baja Health Cluster, says they want to prevent the spread in Mexico, including among migrants, where the risk is particularly high due to unsanitary, crowded conditions.
They are confined in places we know they don't have, enough toilets or enough washing water or separated spaces.
At one shelter, a Guatemalan asylum seeker with 3 children faced an uncertain future.
I never wanted to leave my country. I never wanted to expose my kids to so much danger.
But she says she had no choice. The people threatening to kill her family in Guatemala were scarier than the coronavirus. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Jean Guerrero in Tijuana.
Life isn't easy, and we must all try to help each other. But right now, stability where you are is more important than trying to go someplace else.
Americans now staying home, the pandemic continues to have a major effect on nearly all aspects of our lives. But one area getting less attention is how that isolation can exacerbate the problem of domestic violence. John Yang has a closer look.
Judy, in past times of stress like 9/11, the economic downturn of 2008, and Hurricane Katrina, experts say that the intensity and frequency of domestic abuse has gone up. Katie Ray Jones is the CEO of the National Domestic Violence Hotline. She joins us by Skype from Austin, Texas. Katie, thanks so much for being with us. In the current situation, the current environment, what concerns you most? What are you most worried about?
Yeah, I think for us, John, what we're most worried about at the National Domestic Violence Hotline is knowing that many victim survivors are currently living in isolation with their abusive partner, and their ability to seek help or guidance is significantly limited, knowing that oftentimes abusive partners are observing phone calls or watching what material someone might be looking at on their device. So we're really concerned right now, knowing that history has shown us with an increased severity of abuse and increased frequency of abuse, that many survivors are currently in dire situations.
To what extent
Sheesh,
is
what a
social
shame.
distancing to try to stop the virus spreading contributing or aiding or abetting people who commit this violence and abuse?
It's a great question. What we know is that oftentimes abusive partners will leverage something happening in society as a further means to isolate, create fear, intimidate, or coerce a victim. We have already started to hear stories from survivors who are reaching out to the hotline who are indicating that their abusive partner has indicated that they can't go to work, they can't see family, they can't see friends, as a means to what they feel is further isolate them, and leveraging COVID-19 as a means to do that. We've already heard some really distressing stories where one woman shared that her community where she's currently residing does not have shelter-in-place protocols. Her employer was indicating it was safe for her to go to work, and her abusive partner essentially said, "You're not going." And when she stated she was, he actually took the firearm out in their home and began to load the firearm. And she said that this is not something he had ever done, that they have an abusive relationship, but he had never brought a firearm out before. And this was causing her really great concern. So we know that
I guess so.
there's fear, misinformation in society, that oftentimes people who have control issues, power issues, they may exacerbate those dynamics in their abusive relationship.
How is this complicating your work? For instance, are shelters operating? Are they worried about social distancing in that sense too?
Yeah, so we've already seen our ability to even connect some survivors to shelters or exit strategies be greatly impacted. We know shelters are going to great lengths to deeply sanitize shelters, keep existing residents safe. So it absolutely makes sense that one's ability to continue to do intakes, to take in new clients, may be limited. We've heard from survivors who were really holding out for their custody hearing, their divorce hearing.